So for the lecture, it's going to work thusly. I'm going to show you how to read a file in preparation for tomorrow's lab. Okay, which is the Hurricane Tracker lab. And then I'll show you why that's, and first I'll show you why that's kind of important. So I'll do that by just downloading our lab from our Canvas website. So share screen, I'm going to go ahead and share my entire screen with you because that is what we will need. Okay, so let's share this. And what I'll do is I'll go to modules. Again, and here I'm explaining what I'm going to be talking about today. So here I download Hurricane Tracker. Here is the file to download. So I'm going to drop it on my desktop. Okay, and let's see. Short by type. Oh, went over here. Not on my desktop. There we go. Now it's on my desktop. So let's go ahead and I will unzip it. Yes, you can rewatch this recording. That's why I'm recording it. So anyway, here's the starter files. I'm going to go ahead and extract it I'm going to move it up a folder. There we go. So over here in starter files, we have a couple different files. We have data, images, and irma.py. Now, for those of you who are using VS Code, just hold on a second, pause share. There we go. Okay, resume share. So for those of us using VS Code, first we have to say, yes, I trust this. And then if you run it, you'll notice you'll get a bunch of errors. This is specific to VS Code. If you're having trouble with VS Code and getting this to work in VS Code, I'd highly recommend what I'll be doing, which is working in idle, which doesn't have to deal with this. But suffice to say, it's because you need to open this entire folder in VS Code in order to do this. Because otherwise it's not going to be understanding that it's just a quirk of VS Code. And again, I'm not going to spend too much time going into that. Instead, what you'll want to use if you're using VS Code and running into errors about file not found is that you're going to want to open this in idle. Open. Desktop. Starter files. irma.py. So here's our file. Okay. Specifically, take a look up here where you may not have looked before. And I know it's going to be very hard for you to see. But that says C/users/profa, short for Professor Andrew Rosen, /desktop. So that's my desktop /starter file /irma.py. That over here tells me where I am. This is the same for both, and that should work in both Python in idle for both Windows and on Mac computers. And if I run this is your homework. You should get this, which is that it will flicker and give you a white screen. Now, what's important to know is that if we take this file, okay, irma.py, and I'm just going to copy it and move it outside the file. Or I'm going to copy it out here and I'm going to open up a separate copy. Open file. Desktop, irma.py, and notice now I'm going to put it over here that it says it's users.profa/desktop/irma. Notice it's not in the starter files folder anymore. These are different. You'll want to check them in the recording, but that's fine. But the point being is that one's on my desktop, one's in a folder on my desktop. If I run this, run module, I'm going to get all these nasty errors. These are the errors that would auto fail you. saying that over here, there's no such file or directory. This is because files, when you're file reading, expect them to be in the same, in a specific place. Specifically, they expect your files to be in the same folder as as your Python file. So the file you're trying to read, it doesn't matter what the file is, it assumes it wants to be in the same folder. Or in the case of your Irma program, which handles all this for you over here for dealing with creating the Atlantic Basin picture and the like, that's going to be in a subfolder. Okay. So here's what we're going to do for now that that we've got a critical mass of people. We're going to show you how file reading works in this program, because in the Irma program, we have two folders. We have the data folder, which you don't need to move anything outside of data here. You just need to get into the subfolder. But we have all these, what's called CSV files. CSV files are going to become very familiar to you. I'm going to be using them a couple of times in this class, including probably on an exam. But what they stand for is comma separated value files. So let's go ahead and open up Irma. You can open it up in Excel by double clicking it. I'm just going to open you and show you what it actually is by opening it in Visual Studio Code. And I'll show you how it looks sometimes by opening it up here. So double click it, it opens up an Excel sheet. It's got date, time, latitude, longitude, wind, and pressure. So these are basically at this time, the hurricane was at this position and it was this intense. That data is physically stored in just a text file that looks like this, where all the values, where each column is separated by a comma, hence why it's called comma separated value. And it just very easily gets rendered into this kind of stuff. So we want to be able to read file, but the important thing is that this is what we call a text file. There are two types of files in existence. They're broadly speaking. There are binary files, which are files that are meant for the computer to read. And then there's files that are meant for you and I and humans to read. So let's take a look at, so for instance, opening this back up with code, Irma is what we call a text file because it's got human readable text. It ends with the extension .csv, but all the extension in a program on your computer really does is it tells the operating system, hey, I'd like to open it with this program by default. Take that for comparison by the NES, Nintendo Entertainment System, or Famicom system, ROM of Dragon Warrior, one of my favorite games for the NES. It says it's not displayed in a text editor because it's either a binary or uses an unsupported text encoding. And I'll just open it in a text editor and we see that it is unreadable. This is not instructions that are meant to be read by a human. These are instructions specifically meant to be read by a computer, specifically an NES or an NES emulator, a Nintendo Entertainment System. It is just simply, why did I use this as an example? It was what was on my desktop, and I knew it was a binary file. But this is all gibberish. You can't read it because it's a binary file. Oh, there is a header here saying that it's an NES file, though. That's cool. So for the most part, when I'm talking about reading files, we'll be talking about reading text files. There are some times where we want to read, there are some libraries that are useful for reading certain binary files that read stuff like PDFs. But anyway, that's not the focus of here. And regardless, it's still easy. Now, file reading, despite me going on about it, isn't all that hard. First, we need to get ourselves a text file for us all to read and something to download for us. So I'm going to go and introduce you to one of my favorite websites on the internet, Project Gutenberg. Gutenberg.org. As in the Gutenberg Bible. which is the first widely used, which is the first widely distributed book courtesy of the printing press. Now this Project Gutenberg, what they have is that they basically try to get as much public domain, copyright free stuff that they can. So things like, Mark Twain's work, or in the case of what we're going to be doing, today, we're going to be looking at some of Shakespeare's work, specifically Hamlet, because I tested this file and I know it's going to work. So we're going to search for the file Hamlet, and I'm going to go ahead and click on the first one. See, I think that should be 54. Yes. And let me go ahead and drop a link to it in the chat for you in case you're getting in case you're having trouble navigating or slow typing. And I highly encourage you to follow along with this, because what we're going to do is I'm going to show you how this works. And then the second part of this lecture is troubleshooting for students who are having trouble getting this working for one reason or another. If you get this working, once you get the file reading working, you are free to go. I'm not going to hold on to you, but there's a lot of people who have trouble getting this working. So I want to make sure that gets addressed. So here we have a HTML. We're not going to bother using that. EPUB files, which are useful for ebooks. These are binary files, so we're not really going to read them. But here, what we're going to click on is plain text UTF-8. So we are going to click on that, and come on. See, here we go. And what happens right now depends on what internet browser you're on. I should very much point that out. So in Firefox, for me, it opens up the text file, the file itself over here. One way to deal with this is that you can right click on plain text over here and save link as to download it. Okay, there we go. And here I can save it, and I'm going to save it. It suggests PG1524 since it is the Project Gutenberg's 1524th thing that they uploaded. I'm just going to call it something easier to remember, which is the title, Hamlet. That'll save it as a text file. And there we go. Another thing I can do if it opens up like this is that I can press Control S or Command S on a Mac. Same thing over here. It will save this page a text file. Because it is a text file. It's very important that that only works, though, if you're on this page over here with the .txt extension. If you try doing this over here, you'll download the entire HTML page, which won't work there. So go ahead and download this plain text file. It's 200 kilobytes. And then you should be able, after you download it, you should be able to open it by double clicking on it. And it will open into the text editor of your choice. In fact, we can even open it in idle if we so chose. Open desktop, and normally we just open Python files, but over here you can select this drop-down window and select text files as well. And it's more than happy to open that up for you to take a look at. Let's see, how did it work? Oh, okay, it's working. Nice. Okay, great. So it immediately identified it, picked it up on it, and that's great. So again, just download that file and let me know. Let me go ahead and let's see, polls. Yeah, so let's see, participants, chat. So yeah, let me know via reaction how, if you're ready for me to move on. You were able to download the file or you need more time. A thumbs up to move on, and basically some kind of no gesture or emoji to say that we need to hold on. There should be reactions in here, I believe. Yes, Anthony. I see a, oh, nope. Okay, that was the wrong. Yeah, reactions. There we go. Oh, excellent question. Where do we put the starter file? The answer is you want, or where do we put Hamlet? The answer is wherever you want to be working today and running your code. So if that's on your desktop, you can put it on your desktop. If it's where if you want to put it with your Python programs, because you put all your Python programs in one folder, you should put it in that same folder as your Python programs. So you want to put this file wherever you're going to be working today. Make sense? I'm going to be working on my desktop, and then I'll move these things together. Make sense? Good. All right. So we don't really need to open up in Python. You can double click it and get it open up. I was just showing that it will open up in any text editor, anything that reads text. It needs to be a .txt. If it's not .txt, you're going to be doomed for failure on that one. So download the plain text UTF-8. So none of these, it's going to be last one down here. Last of the book ones, last of the ones before more files. You click on UTF-8, either, and that'll bring you up to here, or it'll do something, and if you're in an unfamiliar position, you can just right click on it. If you are using Safari, I know that Safari can sometimes give you some trouble with this, because Safari is very picky about about trying to protect you from downloading stuff on the internet to your Mac. So just keep that in mind, that you might want to use a separate browser for that, a different browser for that, but it's no problem. But open up in Python, again, we just simply, which we won't be doing for most part because it's not really useful, is that we just simply could open it, go to where we are, and then select either text files or all files, and it will show up on the list of things to open. And we could edit it from Python, which is kind of nifty, or edit from idle. Okay. So how do you download it? Right click, save link as. Right click, save page as. Click on it. It should come out with a download dialog or something like it. There's save link as, save page as. It will the language differs based on your web browser. I'm using one of the what's nowadays a rare web browser, because Firefox isn't nearly as popular as it used to be. But if you're using a Chrome-based browser, this should pose no difficulty for you. Okay. So now that we've got this, I've got my Hamlet file over here on my desktop. So I'm going to go ahead and create and open up idle. Because again, idle, I find this easier to work with right there. If you want to get it working in VS Code, there's tutorials on how to do that. But it essentially means that you've got to make sure that you're opening up a project rather than a single folder or a file. So we're going to open up. So actually, rather than opening a file, I'm going to create a new file. A new Python file, which I did by pressing Control-N or Command-N on a Mac, or I just simply hit new file over here. You've been doing that for a while now, hopefully. But what I do is now I've got an untitled folder. I'm going to save this file so that I can get it put in the right place. So I'm going to navigate to the same place Hamlet is. My Hamlet file, the file I just downloaded is. I'm going to click where that is. That's here on the desktop. And I'm going to type in whatever I want to name it. I'm going to call it file reading example. I downloaded it in a .txt format. That means it's this file over here. This is the .txt format. It is imperative that it's the .txt format because well, you should be able to download it if you're on your laptop. And again, then if you're on a Mac, then it is command click or control click for secondary click. All you have to do if you're on a Mac is just simply be on your desktop with the file if they're both on the desktop. If you're on your desktop for a Mac, let's see. I think you would just need to browse to your home folder and then desktop. So Macs use a Unix-based structure, which will look something like this. It'll be /users/ your username. And inside here are all your files. Sorry. Inside here will be a folder called home, I believe. And inside home is all your folders, like all your documents. So your desktop lives in this path. Your documents, your music, your videos, that's where all those folders live. And what it does for Unix-based stuff, rather than having a C drive or a D drive, it has root, which is very abstract. As I mentioned, of the files that you must download, and this is why I haven't moved on yet, you download this one, the plain text UTF-8. So you'll be able to navigate there, and your desktop. So if you start from root, you'll be able to get there. But regardless, it's in the same folder as your as all your other documents are. Okay. So let's go ahead and get file reading done, or get some file reading. So here I am in my file reading example. Now, this is actually the moment I fell in love with Python, which is why I find this so important, because in Java, it was a pain. You had to do a lot of stuff when I was learning Java. You had to take a buffered reader and threw that into a file reader. And that was like I think there might have been another reader in between them. It was a mess to do file reading in Python. Oh, no, get me started on C, where you open up a file and then you have to read one character at a time. Drives me nuts. To this day, it drives me nuts. That is the way that file reading is done in C. One character at a time. It is painful. Python, on the other hand, is painless. So what we do to open a file in Python is, first off, we can double check that we're in the same path that we want to be. File reading example over here. Now, this is typically the most common reason you can't read the file. File reading example.py, user, and it says it's users, profile, desktop, file reading example. So it's on my desktop folder. Okay. And this is just simply making me realize that I definitely should have downloaded a illicit copy of Mac OS so I could run it in a virtual machine, just so I can demo this to everybody. Okay. So how we do, so this is in the same place. And to open this file, we just use this. We just simply say open. Open. And then notice that as soon as I open parentheses, it says that there's a bunch of options here. And all we need to do is just simply give it the file name. There are some other things we probably want to do for politeness, for the sake of politeness, but that's really all it says we need to do. And let's go ahead and run it. If I run it, it will do nothing. But if I say, let's see, if I put in something incorrect, let's see what happens. The file name is hamlet.txt. Oh, I'll spell it Halmet, just for more incorrectness. And if you're not putting in the right file or the file name, or it's in a different path, you're going to get this error. Yes, this is definitely being recorded. I try to record everything. The file name is, so over here, if you're trying to open a file that doesn't exist, you will get this error, which says file not found error, no such file or directory, and it'll tell you the name of the file. This is most likely because the file you are writing, the Python file that you're writing, and the target of our text file are in different directories, in different folders. So here, though, all I have to do is just simply say Hamlet. Now that's not necessarily, but we opened a file, we probably want to do stuff with it. So I'm going to go ahead and store this file reading stream. Technically what it's not doing is that it's not reading the file. It's opening up a stream to read the file. A stream basically so that it can pull all the zeros out, all the zeros and ones out of this file in an organized fashion. So I'm going to simply call it data because that's nice and abstract and it doesn't kludge with the word file. And then, okay. And if we try printing data, we're going to see that it's not the text file, but instead what it's going to say is that it is a text IO wrapper. And depending on what platform you're using, you'll see hamlet.txt, mode, and then here we see encoding is equal to CP1252, which is, I believe, the legacy default encoding for Windows. So let me explain encoding for a second. Back in the nasty old days of, not the good old days because it was nasty, the nasty old days of early computing, basically everything, all text was basically represented with 8 bits. Those first 7 bits were used for ASCII characters because the Anglosphere really didn't, what was dominant and really didn't think, oh, we maybe need more than just these characters. The 128 characters, they were devoted for basically some commands like tabs, hitting a new line, but also all the letters, as we saw on our cryptography exercise. With our cryptography exercise, we saw that A was equal, the letter A was stored numerically as 97. Okay, so the numbers 0 to 127 were used for that. And then from 128 to 255, that was kind of a free-for-all, depending on the system. Those different systems were called different encodings. And eventually that got really confusing. So everybody, because you could send a document that was written for a German encoding, send it to a French, to somebody in France, and it would show up as gibberish. So no more multiple encodings. Instead, we need Unicode. Unicode is amazing. It's brilliant. There's a wonderful video on it about how amazing it is, but it is a single standard for basically all text. That includes text that is, in non-Western text, like all the Chinese language, because that can't be fit into 256 characters. One very popular encoding format of Unicode is UTF-8, which is backwards compatible with ASCII, so it's really, really nice to use. But regardless, Windows default is CP1252. CP1252. I'm just going to fact check myself here. Yep, was the use by default of legacy components of Microsoft Windows. So that's why it's coming up CP22. Now, these are defaults, which is mode R for reading and encoding CP1252. Now, some of you may be wondering, why am I going on about this and not doing the file reading? Because I'm giving people time to catch up on this if they fumbled. So anyway, we got ourselves this file reader. It reads stuff and it assumes the text we're reading is in the format CP1252. Okay, Hamlet's not in 1252, as we'll see, but it's close enough that it works. So how do we read a file? Now, this is the moment I kind of fell in love with Python. I was like, because I figured this out, I'm like, I don't know. I've only been working with Python for a bit. I doubt this will work. Not print data, print line. And it worked. That's it. That's all you have to do to read a file in Python. Well, not all. It certainly helps. Also, we get to see here the consequence of using Python idle. One of the disadvantages of using idle is that it's terrible at printing out stuff quickly. Terrible. Let's see. Just absolutely terrible. It also doesn't help that Hamlet is one of those really long plays. You can see movie adaptations that are anywhere from 2 to 4 hours long. And it's a good play too. You're probably most familiar with Hamlet in the form of its most popular adaptation, The Lion King. Which is both, it is closer to the true than, well, it's a very, you hit a number of tropes with Shakespeare, and so anything that's similar is going to rhyme like it. So here we go. We've printed out all that stuff, and let's see what happened here. Okay, so my buffer was big enough to hold that. So, okay, notice that it's printed by that it's separated by spaces over here, by the way, blank lines. It's because I read a line, I print it out, and I get this. Also notice that I've got these weird characters. A with a carrot on its head. I think, is that, what sign is that? I know that's a monetary sign. I don't think it's euro, is it? No. The TM symbol, but this together, like Shakespeare probably didn't use trademark after every instance of Polonius. No, what this is an apostrophe, and it's not rendering correctly. Because, again, that legacy format, Python is assuming this is in a different format than it actually is. There's so like I said earlier, there's some stuff that we would probably want to include in here to be polite, especially with files if you're working on Windows. The first thing, which we should almost always include, is what are we doing with the file? R, which if you make a guess at that, it means that we're reading the file. There's 3 different letters we could put here. There's read, there's write, which writes a new file. So if you have data over here in this file already and you choose to write it and you start writing stuff in it, guess what? You just, if you had stuff in it, it deletes it, it overwrites it. And then we have append, which is like write, but not as mean, and sometimes is useful, which is that it opens up your file and then starts adding to the end of it, which is useful. Read, write, and append. This is used in all programming languages, paradigms. And then finally, what we're going to do is we're going to do encoding. Now, this shouldn't be necessary all the time. In fact, it's rarely necessary, but we're going to do it here. And I think it's UTF-8, no underscores. If not, I'll Google it and see there, because this is something I literally have to do only for this exercise, just to show you. Okay. And let's go ahead and stop this output. Let's make it a bit more manageable. Okay. So this is one way to read a file, and it was very gratifying that Python runs in this format. Okay. But the other way we can read a file is a bit more direct. We can take the entire text of a file, the entire text of Hamlet in this case, and store it in there by just doing data.read. So if we have a file and we just say read it, we will get a file. We'll get a text file. Now let's do something a bit more manageable. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do some slicing here. I'm going to say print text, and I'm going to print out the first 1,000 characters of Hamlet, which won't be that much. Oh, I missed something, which is I forgot to close it. I still make these mistakes all the time just because, I'm moving fast. Okay. Now, that was exactly as long as I needed, the first 1,000 characters. Now, without the encoding UTF-8, we were getting, so without this bit, we were getting this over here. With UTF-8 encoding, because remember, we downloaded the file and it said it was a text UTF-8 file, we get this. this is not this. That's part of ASCII. This is part of Unicode. Nice, good-looking, curled apostrophes. And nice, good-looking quotation marks. So that's why you might see that. So you may have seen this sometime. If you're viewing old files and delving into old readmes, you might get this rendered sometimes like this. Why does that happen? Just your computer's reading a different encoding. But most encodings are backwards compatible with ASCII, so it works out just fine. So the UTF-8 normally doesn't have to be encoded, but it's useful. Finally, there's one more way to do this, right? This gives us the text and stores it in one giant string, which can be both useful and useless. But if we want a more formalized, more controllable way of doing this, we have one with text.read. Let's see, does it come up? Not text. Data dot read. And I think it's lines. Let me go ahead and double check. Not read line. That just read one. Read lines. There we go. Okay, so that does work. So all these are mutually exclusive because once you read through a file, you can't read through it again, I believe. So here, what I'll do is I'll print out lines, or rather, once you read through a file, you can't read through it in the same instance of the program or the same instance of opening it. So print lines, and let's get the first 100 lines of Shakespeare. And there we go. We have a list showing the first 100 lines. We get this weird begin of file character over here. And then that's the first line. And then there's an empty line. And then there's another line. And so on and so forth. All right. So we can do some stuff in this, which is, and Python's really good for this kind of stuff, like being able to parse through this data and look through it. For instance, if I wanted to do something basic, like search for the number of times that Hamlet appears in the play, the word Hamlet in this document, rather, I can do so, where I can just do what we've been doing for the entire semester, where I say, hey, I've loaded this up in a string over here. Actually, let's go ahead and use this. We've read the text. So now what we'll do is all we have to do is say, chat. Christine, I will go ahead and so I will be moving on to the troubleshooting section in just a bit with regards to that, and I'll be able to help you because this is why I have the troubleshooting portion of this afterwards, because some people encounter weird errors. So now we can just do whatever we would normally want to do, which is like text dot lower to turn it lowercase dot count Hamlet, which will count the number of times Hamlet appears in the play, in this file. 478 times. Hamlet gets there's a lot of Hamlet in Hamlet, apparently. Who would have thought? But this is the basis for this. So it is 240. Now, the reason I put I do this again is because doing this seems a bit easy for some of you, but sometimes there's weird stuff that happens in multiple places, such as downloading the file, trying to locate the file, trying to make sure that everything's put in different places, having two copies of the same file because you downloaded one and then didn't think you did it right, so you download another, but it was in a different place, and now you don't know where anything is. So this is why we have the troubleshooting section. So if you were able to get this working, if you were able to just simply open the file and read it and then print out what you read, congratulations, you're done for the day. You're free to go. If on the other hand, you're having trouble getting working, then stick around and I'll split you up into breakout rooms and go through you individually. All right. and I'll be going through those breakout rooms in order. Just be aware that in order to get help, you'll want to share your screen. You'll want to be able to share your screen, or we could all stay here and I could start taking people one at a time, because what one person is having issues with may help the entire class. What encoding does is that it tells it so encoding, what that does is that tells us how the bits in the file are arranged, how they're organized. It tells us basically, am I reading a French file? Am I reading a English file? Oh, I'm reading one of those newfangled UTF-8 format files, which are universal. Great. That's what the encoding does. In almost every case, Joey, you're not going to need UTF-8 in any of the file stuff we did for in all the stuff we did previously. You're not going to need in all the stuff for the IRMA lab, you're not going to need UTF-8 or the encoding. This is literally the only time in the semester you should be seeing it. All right. So let's go ahead. No, you do not need to submit this. This is just simply me doing a walkthrough on how to do this. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording now.